I'm Ethan Reed McKay. I'm playing David. David is a young boy, 11 years old, and he has muscular dystrophy, which is a degenerative muscle disease that turns muscle into fat. And what's fatal about it is that eventually, after it goes over your entire body, it starts working on your heart and lungs, and eventually they just, stop working. Well, it's definitely difficult because it's such a challenging role, and yet I have to be paying attention to the physicality to make sure that the audience doesn't get thrown by it and then get taken away from the story. So it's difficult. What I did to prepare for it was I tried to ask a lot of questions to Lyle because he had been around David. And I also went on YouTube and I looked up videos of kids with muscular dystrophy and kind of tried to observe how they move and how their physicality is. And what I noticed is that lots of times they have a scoliosis, so their spine kind of bends, and eventually their body gets weak, so they can't really support their back, and it goes back like this. And the input Lyle gave me is that when he's on the wheelchair, David, he never had his hands on the armrests, he always had them off the side. So I tried to implement that. Also, what was very challenging is not moving my legs. What I think is very interesting about David, though, is that even though he has no time, he doesn't have very much time to live, and he knows that, he's just not selfish at all. I mean, he's very giving to other people. There are a lot of times where I try to draw from my life experiences, times where I know there's something that I'm only going to be able to experience for a small amount of time. And also, I just try to know the character very well. I do a lot of thinking about it. I just try to make sure that since he's a real person, I just try to inhabit him as much as possible, but know that he's already predefined, so I have to fulfill that. That's one of the biggest responsibilities for me. It may sound strange, but I actually did a lot of talking to God, and I just try to listen as much as I could instead of trying to define the role for myself, because I knew if I got all of these ideas in my head of who David was and how I imagined him, then the character might seem very artificial. So I just tried to take direction very well and also do a lot of deep thinking about the character. The most difficult thing is that he goes to heaven for a brief amount of time and he comes back. And obviously there's no way that I could know what that looks like. But I had to imagine it and completely commit to it. So that was the most challenging scene for me so far. This story for me is very holy. Not in a biblical sort of way, but for me, whenever I meet someone, especially if they're incredibly nice and self-giving, who knows that they aren't going to live for very long, it's almost like they're on loan to us on earth from God, because they're going to be going back very soon. So it was very difficult and complex to have the responsibility of embodying that in David. I had to find a way to appear ethereal, but not at all aloof. That was the most interesting part and my favorite. My relationship with Brayden is very interesting because our characters are very contrasting. So when we're preparing for a character, it's very different. So there has to be a deep level of respect and understanding for there not to be clashes. We actually have very good chemistry, so it's interesting to be able to work with somebody who can embody that character well, because it helps me know how to play David. Well, it's definitely fun, but it's also a challenge. I wouldn't necessarily call it a burden, but I have to carry a lot of weight and make sure that the story is told properly, because it's a really beautiful one. And it's one that needs to be told.